Welcome back to the Mark Moses Show, only right here on Sports Radio 95.9 The Fan. And right now here on the Club 52 hotline, a good man up there in Tallahassee covers the Florida State Seminoles in the ACC for his website, Tomahawk Nation. And yeah, we're going to talk undefeated 10-0 Seminoles football right now. His name is Bud Elliot. Bud, how you doing today, man?
Mark, good to be on the show with you.
I appreciate coming on, and let's start with the obvious here on a Wednesday. They're undefeated, but now they're number 3 still in the latest 4-team standings. What were your thoughts when you heard about that Tuesday night?
You know, I heard the committee chair discuss the concept of game control, and I like the comment that Danny Cannell had, which was, what about end of game control? You know, actually winning the game. So if you think about, you know, if we were to use the concept of game control to evaluate other professions in life, like, you know, maybe a delivery driver who goes really fast and usually gets the package there, but then sometimes he crashes, you know, as opposed to a guy who doesn't. And I really don't think that you should have a major conference team that's undefeated behind other major conference teams who are not, unless those teams are just so obviously dominant. But yet they really haven't been. In a year of college football where I think we can all agree there's no great team, there's a lot of very good teams, I really think you have to defer to the record.
Isn't the guy in charge, the main guy, isn't that Jeff Long, the AD at Arkansas school that's in the SEC? Or am I crazy here?
No, it is. And there's very little ACC representation on the committee. I think there's one guy with strong ACC ties on the committee. You also have Mike Trangisi, who was the commissioner of the old Big East, who obviously saw his conference fall apart at the hands of the ACC when they raided and took Virginia Tech and Miami and Boston College. So probably not a whole lot of people on that committee lobbying for the Seminoles, I would have to imagine.
All right, well, here's the thing. We're here with Bud Elliot. Tomahawk Nation covers the Noles. They're number 3 in the latest standings. How good is this football team? You see it day in and day out. I know they're 10-0. Everyone's hating on them. What about you? What's your take on this football team right now here in November?
You know, I mean, it's not a great team. I think that I think it would probably lose to just about all of the national champions of the last decade, but I think I would probably say similar things about Oregon and Alabama. I mean, they're clearly not great. If you watch the Bama game, they should have dropped 40 on Mississippi State, but because of quarterback play, they couldn't. You know, Oregon really doesn't play much defense this year at all. This is a Florida State team that is capable of winning a national title in this given year, probably not in other years. And I think because of the uniqueness of this year, with so little separation, even in like the top 10 teams, really, the most important thing is that you actually just get into the tournament, because there's no dominant team waiting as the number 1 seed where you're like, well, even if they make it, they still have to figure out a way to beat like 2005 Texas or somebody. Mm-hmm. That doesn't exist this year. So the most important thing is to get in. And I think Florida State is good enough to get in. And they're good enough to beat anybody they play in the playoffs. They're also not at a level where you feel real confident that they're going to beat anybody they play in the playoffs. They could easily lose as well.
But I want you to know, Saturday night, I'm watching the game with Noles and Hurricanes fans, and the Cane fans are going crazy in that first quarter, and they should. And I'm like, calm down, wait for it, here it comes, wait till the fourth quarter. Is that every week now, where you just put that in your game notes, like, yeah, whatever, just get me to the fourth, and we'll pull this out?
Well, it really is. And Florida State is like a baseball team with a really strong bullpen.
Yeah.
You know that bullpen is going to keep your baseball team in games, and then it's going to allow you to have enough at-bats. With Florida State, it's Jameis Winston. It's the best kicker in the country, Roberto Aguayo. Those guys, if you are in a close game with Florida State, you are almost certainly at a disadvantage at the 2 most important positions in close games, which is kicker and quarterback. And that makes it tough to really finish the job on FSU. You have to bury these guys when you have the chance to do so. And I'm not saying nobody can beat them in a close game, because it certainly can happen. But Florida State feels very comfortable in these situations now, having played in like 4 or 5 of them in the last 2 months.
All right, what do you need on them? 30-point lead at half? What's a safe lead against Florida State in your mind?
Louisville was up 21-0, and that couldn't last. I think if you get up 24, especially with any of these teams that they're going to face down the stretch, Boston College is very good at running the football. Florida, which plays really good defense, while their offense is certainly not very good. So it'd be kind of hard to see them getting up 24. or anybody in the playoffs. I mean, I think if you look at one of these playoff teams, if they're up 17 or 21, it's most likely over, but it's hard to fully count these guys out after what we've seen this year.
We're with Bud Elliott, Tomahawk Nation. Can't you make a case? You look at these ACC schools like Louisville, like NC State, and Miami this past Saturday, that, okay, they get their big lead on the Noles, and then they just play conservative the rest of the way, and they get scared. And then Florida State, they're like, all right, we got you now. Couldn't you make that case, Bud?
I think to an extent you can for some of those games. NC State was one. Certainly, I thought they got a little conservative. I know a lot of Miami fans were claiming that the Hurricanes got conservative. What I actually saw in that ballgame, though, was that Florida State pulled a linebacker off the field and went to an extra defensive back, which, it was limiting Miami's big play potential there in the second half and sort of inviting Miami to run. And I think Miami made the correct decision to run. They were running the ball well. Florida State takes a linebacker off, puts another DB on the field. Why wouldn't you run the ball? Florida State's defensive line just stepped up and had enough tackles for loss and stops the line of scrimmage to get Miami behind the sticks. But the Seminoles were the ones responsible for the major reduction in big plays in the second half due to the personnel change they made.
We're here with Bud Elliott, Tomahawk Nation. We're talking about the Noles, and I got to get your take on this. A lot of Noles fans, what I hear from, they don't like how the defense has been this season, even though they're undefeated. And I'm hearing crazy analogies where it's like, oh, maybe we should get Will Muschamp as our defensive coordinator. What about you? What are your thoughts on how this defense has played here in 2014?
I mean, it's certainly been disappointing, but they've also had a lot of injuries. I think 39 guys have started for them this year, and most of those guys who have been hurt have been on the defensive side of the football. The offense has been fairly healthy. Last year, I think you had 24. So 24 versus 39, pretty big gap there. And I think particularly the play at linebacker, due to the injuries and due to some of the issues they've had there, has really limited how they can call the defense. If your linebackers are so limited in coverage due to injury or just poor play, there's a lot of coverages you just can't run. And so they're more predictable in coverage this year. The pass rush is also not as good, so they're having to take more chances and leave their corners, who are good corners, just on an island much more frequently. I've heard all the Will Muschamp stuff. I don't think Will Muschamp will be the defensive coordinator of this team for a few reasons. One, I'm sure some SEC team will drop to $1.2 million or $1.3 million to get him as a coordinator. Two, you got to think, Florida State has been recruiting against Muschamp and Muschamp against Florida State for the last 4 years. What has he been telling kids to get them to go to Gainesville when that program has been doing nothing as opposed to Florida State? Are you selling pro-Florida stuff, or are you selling anti-Tallahassee, anti-ACC stuff? And if it's the latter, you have to then suddenly take your sales pitch, junk it, and then go pitch something completely different to these folks that you were just selling stuff to for the last 4 years. Might not be the best idea.
You make it like it's an analogy where he's in a beat-up old car going to the kid's house, and he's like putting on his Florida State hat, which still has the tag on it. Like, hey, I'm back. Oh, that's so funny.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're here with Bud Elliott, Tomahawk Nation. What about this kid, Delvin Cook, a guy who was recruited to Florida? Now he's in FSU colors. Man, he's been pretty good, right?
He really has. And I think that as he learns the pass protections, which is really important because you obviously have Jameis Winston back there, and you can't get him blown up on just simple blitz pickups that are missed. As he learns those pass protections, he's going to get more and more playing time. He's still not perfect. He still has some sort of Pop Warner high school in him that he tries to bounce stuff to the outside very well. But we saw him on Saturday night have a couple nice runs that began inside the tackles, and then he made a backer miss, and it was off to the races. That's what they need more from him. If he really, gets in that playbook, becomes more comfortable in the pass protection game, I think you're going to see him continue to get more carries. He's truly a special talent. I mean, we knew it certainly throughout his high school career, but last year in the state title game, I think he ran for 352 against Armwood, which is a traditional powerhouse there out of Tampa. A really, really good player. Yeah.
We're here with Bud Elliott, Tomahawk Nation. What about number 5, Mr. Winston? What are your thoughts of how he's played of late?
I think he's doing a pretty good job. The one thing I think that's overlooked here, this is a fairly young, well, I don't want to say it's a young offense, but there's a clear split between vets and guys who are really young on this offense. When you have 4 true freshmen in the starting lineup now at various times. And that's a lot of young guys you have to manage and make sure they're in the right spots, that their mindset is okay. When you're down 16-0 or 23-7, you have to be able to tell those kids, hey, relax, we've got this. They have to trust in you. I think Winston's had to be a better leader this year than he was last year, because last year's team just had so much veteran leadership all up and down the board. This year, it's really kind of been on him.
You got to explain to me the Kevin Hart story, because it came out like Monday morning, like, oh yeah, Kevin Hart was at practice. When did this happen? Because it's super epic. We loved playing the audio.
I think it happened Sunday or Monday. He was in Tallahassee to do a show, and then he swung by practice, and he was cracking on Jameis, and all the other guys were laughing, and Jameis was, I don't know, kind of laughing, kind of annoyed by it. I'm sure he's heard a boatload of crab legs jokes, since that came out in June. But yeah, it was. I got a pretty good laugh out of it. It's
interesting that, like what you just said, the teammates are laughing, so they know what's going on. They try to make this idea that Florida State doesn't know what the rest of the world's thinking, but isn't that kind of behind the curtain right there, that they kind of understand what people think about this football team right now?
Oh, there's no doubt. And I think, you look at some of the recruits, and the recruits are tweeting hashtag embrace the hate, and just they're sort of, this team comes out to that Rick Ross song, these haters can't hold me back. They certainly know it.
We're here with Bud Elliot, Tomahawk Nation. It's very interesting. I want your thoughts on recruiting real quick, because, look, you have all these New York Times articles trying to destroy the football team, the community, the program, with what's going on there. But you look at recruiting on Twitter, these kids can't wait to get a photo with Jameis Winston or say they get recruited by Jimbo Fisher. Is that how you feel as well, where they don't really care what the outside world is thinking about this program?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that they don't, and that, that these parents and kids really like how Fisher backs his players and stands up for them and says, we have to focus on facts here and not supposition and not op-ed pieces disguised as reporting. And I think that, Fisher took some heat for standing up for his guys, but in recruiting, that certainly paid off. He said, look, I'm going to back you. I'm not going to let somebody railroad you. This is the family, and he preaches family at every turn. Parents eat that up, and kids like that as well.
Does Boston College scare you this weekend as maybe a trap game?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I mean, this team is not so good that you can be super confident in it. That they're just kind of coast through the rest of the season. They also don't have a lot of health at linebacker right now, which is a little bit concerning, obviously, because Boston College is a very heavy run team, and you may not be able to defend them quite as well if you're in that nickel like they had to jump into against Miami. If you have to stay in that against Boston College, I think what Florida State is going to need to do is just simply outscore BC to where it becomes apparent that BC cannot just run the ball and eat clock. That they're going to need to start to throw a little bit, start to play catch up. If Florida State gets out the early lead in this game, which seems like an impossible task of late, then I think BC is in a lot of trouble. If BC gets out to a lead, I think it'd be a lot tougher.
I just want you to know the Florida game scares me. If I'm a Seminoles fan, because Muschamp has nothing to lose. I mean, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but what are your thoughts on that game going on, Saturday after Thanksgiving?
Oh, I think anytime you play a defense of that caliber, there's some trepidation, because you know that they can create turnovers and create havoc and create short fields for their offense. I think the best game to happen, or the best thing for Florida State, was the Georgia game, because you can now take that tape and you can say, hey, Florida just fired their coach. Florida, you don't think they're any good. Y'all remember Jeremy Pruitt, right? He was your defensive coordinator last year. Mm-hmm. These guys ran for 450 on Georgia's defense. You better watch this film. You better take them seriously, because they all know and respect Jeremy Pruitt. He did a great job for them last year. And yet his Georgia defense gave up that kind of rushing yards. I think if you're Florida State, that's the game that you point to make your players take Florida 100% seriously here.
Great stuff. Bud Elliot, Tomahawk Nation, does a great job covering FSU and the ACC. Bud, thank you for the time. I know you're busy, man, and I hope I can get you on again.
All right, Mark, enjoyed it.